As part of the talk series organized by the Maths Club of ISET TVM, today we have among us Dr. Prashanta Barik, postdoctoral fellow in our institute, working with Professor Utpal Manna. He did his PhD from IIT Roorkee under the supervision of Professor Ankit Kumar Giri, and his area of research includes partial integral differential equations, coagulation, fragmentation models. Today, he's going to talk about a mathematical study to the continuous coagulation fragmentation models. I'd like to request Dr. Prashanta to share his screen of the presentation.
Oh, thank you, Avinash.
Yeah. And I'd request other participants to keep their screens muted unless they have to ask or comment something. And it's over to Prashanta. Yeah.
Thank you, Avinash. Thank you also, Math Club ISET TVM. Today I am going to talk about a mathematical study to the continuous coagulation fragmentation model. Okay, from the title of my talk, it is clear that I am going to talk about two kinetic processes. One is a coagulation process, another is fragmentation process. Now the question is that what is coagulation? Coagulation is a process in which two or more particles combining together to form a larger size particle, right? And the fragmentation is a reverse process of coagulation. What is fragmentation? Fragmentation is a process in which a large size particle splits into more than two pieces, right? From the definition of coagulation, it is clear that coagulation is a nonlinear process, whereas the fragmentation is may be linear and nonlinear. That depends on the nature of the particle. If the fragmentation occurs due to the collision between two particles, that fragmentation is known as nonlinear fragmentation or nonlinear breakage. If the fragmentation occurs due to the collision between the particle and the wall of the system, or spontaneously, or by the external forces, that fragmentation is known as linear fragmentation, right? Let us look at these figures. Here what happens, a group of particles combining together to form a larger size particle, right? This is the coagulation process. And whereas here a large size particle splits into more than two pieces. It is a fragmentation process. Look at this figure. Here what happens, a particle of size x minus y combined with the particle of size y to form a larger size particle. This is the binary coagulation. The binary coagulation is more realistic in nature because at a particular moment, two particles are combining together to form a larger size particle. It may happen more than two particles are combining together to form a larger size particle, but which is not a realistic in nature. Also, it is also difficult to model into mathematics. Also, it is difficult to study it in mathematics point of view. And also binary fragmentation. Here what happens, a particle of size x plus y, a larger size particle, okay, fragment into exactly two pieces, one a particle of size x and another is particle of size y. Next, this is the multiple fragmentation. Here what happens, a particle of size, a larger size particle splits into more than two pieces, multiple pieces. So it is the multiple fragmentation process. The coagulation and fragmentation process has a lot of applications. A few of one of them is the blood cut form, which is a coagulation application of coagulation process. Sometimes if some part of our body is cut or injured, then blood cut form in that part. Sometimes it is harmful to our human body. If the blood cut form near the heart, then blood cannot flow from the heart to any other part of our body. Then heart attack may cause. So that this means if the blood cut form near the heart, that is harmful for us, right? Similarly, if any other part of our body cuts, then blood cut form near that part, then it prevents to the flow of blood from our body to outside. In that case, it is useful. Similarly, the fragmentation process occurs in certain particle systems. these are my outline of presentation. First, I introduce the Smoluchevsky coagulation equation, which is the first model in this direction. Next, the coagulation and fragmentation model. In the second section, I'll discuss about the existence of mass conserving solution to the coagulation fragmentation equation and some known results. And the method, here I want to apply the weak compactness technique. So in weak compactness technique, we have to go through three processes. One is we have to show the sequence of function is uniform bound, then uniform integrability, then equicontinuity. Finally, I will end of this presentation. I will end with this presentation by showing some selected reference. Now, what is a coagulation fragmentation model? The coagulation process is schematically represented as x plus y. This phi of xy. This is like looks like a kernel. For a discrete case, it is phi xy. For continuous case, it is phi xy. They form together a particular size x plus y. But we are interested the time evaluation of the amount of each cluster or particle. For this, we consider GXT, the concentration of a cluster of size x, where x belongs to n, means the discrete system. Or GXT, concentration of particle of size, any size, right? X belongs to R. For this, I want to discuss a law that law is known as mass action law. The mass action law of chemical kinetics tells us that for the above reaction scheme, for the coagulation reaction scheme, the rate of change of concentration for the discrete case GXT, for the continuous case GXT is proportional to the product of concentration of a species involved in the reaction with the proportionality coefficient phi. Similarly, for the binary fragmentation case, what happens? The particle of size x fragmented with the presence of this fragmentation kernel into two pieces. One is x minus y, another is y. With the presence of this fragmentation kernel, phi of x minus y, y for the continuous case. For discrete case, phi of x minus y, y. Now look at this man. This man, he is the father of this coagulation theory. He is the Marino Smoluchevsky. In 1917, he proposed this pure coagulation, discrete coagulation model in order to describe the coagulation of colloid moving according to the Brownian motion. This man is not only famous for the Smoluchevsky coagulation equation, but he also famous for the concept of the Brownian motion. In 1906, he gave the concept of the Brownian motion, whereas Einstein in 1905 was given this concept. In 1928, the continuous version of a Smoluchevsky coagulation equation is introduced by Mueller. Actually, I am interested in the continuous version of the Smoluchevsky coagulation equation. Therefore, I have not written the discrete version of this equation. Look at this equation 1, right? Here, x and y are the sizes of the particles or the volume of the particle, and t is the time. Xt is the concentration of particle of size x at time. Phi is the coagulation kernel. This kernel, coagulation kernel or coagulation rate. This kernel shows that which is symmetric in nature. This kernel shows that the rate at which these two particles combine to form a particle of size x plus y. Let us describe the second integral of equation number 1. Here what happens? The particle of size x combined with the particle of size y, where y is any size particle, with this rate phi of xy, they form a larger size particle, which is x plus y, right? That means this is the loss of the particle of size x due to the coagulation process, or a death of the particle of size x due to the coagulation process, right? Look at the first integral of above equation. Here what happens? The particle of size x minus y combined with the particle of size y, they form a particle of size of x with this rate phi of x minus y, right? This is the coagulation rate. they form a particle of size x. So this is the bath of the particle of size x. Here the coagulation kernel is symmetric. That means the particle of size x minus y combined with the particle of size y, or particle of size y combined with the particle of size x. So to avoid the double counting, we have multiplied half. The range of integration is taken as 0 to x because the particular size is a non-negative real number or positive real number. So x minus y is greater than 0. So x is greater than y. So the range is 0 to x, and half is multiplied to avoid the double counting. Next, coagulation fragmentation model. In 1916, Friedlander considered the case of a fragmentation which allows splitting of a particle into exactly two small pieces. We have already described the first term and second term of the coagulation process, but the third term and the fourth term are the birth of the particle of size x due to the fragmentation process and the death of the particle of size x due to the fragmentation process. Look at the fourth term of equation number 3. Here what happens? The particle of size x is going to fragment it into exactly two pieces. One is x minus y, another y. That means this is the loss of the particle of size x because we are getting a smaller size particle, right? So this is the loss of the particle of size x due to the fragmentation. Similarly, half is multiplied to avoid the double counting because here the fragmentation kernel C is also symmetric in nature. Look at the third term. Here what happens? The particle of size x plus y is going to fragmented into two pieces, exactly two pieces. One is x and y in the presence of this fragmentation kernel C, right? So here y is any size of the particle. So the range of integration has been taken from 0 to infinity. Next, this is the coagulation and fragmentation model, right? We have already described the coagulation and binary fragmentation model and coagulation, pure coagulation equation, right? Now we'll discuss the coagulation and multiple fragmentation model. Here what happens? The rate of change of a concentration of particle of size x with respect to time t is nothing, that is the bath of the particle due to the coagulation process and the bath of the particle due to the multiple fragmentation process and death of the particle due to the fragmentation process and death of the particle due to the multiple fragmentation process, right? We have already described the first and second integral. Now we'll discuss, we'll describe the third and the fourth integral of equation number 5. Here Sx is the selection rate, right? The selection rate represents the rate at which the particle of size x is going to break into small pieces. B of xy represent the breakage function, which gives the contribution of the particle of size x after breaking particle of size x after breaking a particle of size y due to the multiple fragmentation. Look at the first term. Here what happens? The particle of size x is selected to break into small pieces, right? After breaking the particle size of x after breaking into small pieces, we'll get very, very small pieces. That means this is the loss of the particle of size x due to the multiple fragmentation. In the third integral, here what happens? The particle of size y is selected to break into small pieces. Then after into small pieces, but we need the contribution of particle of size x. So we put a breakage function here, which will give the contribution of the particle of size x. Here, if x is greater than y, then this contribution will be give you 0. So the integration is taken. The range of y is taken from x to infinity. This integration also can be represented by integral form. Each term can be represented by integration. Here we have not represent this term in term of integration. It can be represented. So we introduce another term which is a multiple fragmentation kernel, which is gamma. Here, the multiple fragmentation kernel and selection rate and breakage function has some relation. These relations have these relations have been represented in equation number 7. This breakage function has some nice properties. 0 to y b of xy dx is equal to ny. This ny gives the total number of fragments obtained from the breakage of particle of size y, right? And we need some assumption to solve equation number 5 and 7, coagulation and multiple fragmentation equation with some initial data. Ny is the size independent, means n supremum or ny n of y is equal to n is finite, right? And the necessary condition for mass conservation, 0 to y x b x y dx is equal to y. That means the particle of size y is breaking into small pieces. Suppose x is the small pieces, then the total number of mass of the particle of size y will give 0 to y x b of x conditional y dx is equal to y gives the conservation of a mass of particle of size y. Next, for any physical system, we know that the total mass of particle is neither created or not destroyed. Therefore, in the coagulation process, we expect that the total volume or mass remains conserved during the coagulation fragmentation process. That means the mass any time t is also equal to the initial mass, right? This is known as the mass conservation properties of the solution. But for some coagulation kernel, the total mass of the system breaks down after a finite time due to the presence of appearance of infinite gel. This process is known as gelation transition, and the time at which this process starts is known as the gelation time or gelling time. What happens here, if the fragmentation rate is very high, then the larger size particles are attracted to each other to form a very, very large size particle, which may go away from the system. That process is called a gelation transition, and the time at which this process starts, that time is called gelation time or gelling time. Now how to prove the existence of a solution to this Cauchy problem? Equation number 5 and 6. Equation number 5 was the coagulation and multiple fragmentation equation, and some initial data was there, right? Now we want to prove this Cauchy problem. Equation number 5 and 6, this Cauchy problem we want to prove. How to prove? From physics, we know that the total number of particles and the total mass must be finite. In mathematics, we can write 0 to infinity gxt dx is finite, and the total mass 0 to infinity x gxt dx is finite. So by using these two finite terms, we can introduce a natural functional space that is weighted L1 space. This space is defined as like this: G belongs to L1, such that norm of a 0 to infinity 1 plus x g dx is finite. We can show that this weighted L1 space is a Banach space. But in this lecture, I want to cover some singular coagulation kernel, right? So we need to modify this space by introducing some negative moments. So my space is here. I want to deal the problem by using this space. My weighted L1 space is L1 minus 2 beta 1 0 to infinity, which is defined as 0 G belongs to L1, so that norm of this is defined as like this. This is also a Banach space. We can easily show that this is also a Banach space. Okay, these were the definitions. Now we need some assumption to prove the Cauchy problem 5 and 6. So here we have considered the assumption on phi. Phi is the coagulation kernel, right? Phi is less than equal to k1 1 plus x plus y divided by xy to the power beta, right? Means for large size particle, it has a linear growth. for small size particle, suppose 0 to 1 small size particle, it has singularity near the origin, right? And the breakage function satisfies this type of condition, and the selection rate is less than equal to k to x to the power 1 plus nu. Nu can be 0, so it has like a linear growth, and the initial data belongs to this vector L1 space. These are the information we want to solve that Kachi problem, right? These are some example of coagulation kernel. The coagulation kernel for the Smoluchevsky coagulation kernel for the Brownian motion, this kernel is looks like this kernel can be defined like this, and the granulation kernel of a fluidized bed, which is defined as expressed as like this. Stochastic stir ford. These are some example of a coagulation kernel. Actually, my kernel, what I have taken here, this kernel has covered this type of a coagulation kernel, right? Now, this is the main result. What is the result? Is saying, consider the initial data belongs to this vector L1 space, right? This L1 minus 2 beta 1, and the coagulation kernel satisfies this gamma 1, and breakage function satisfies this gamma 2, and the selection rate satisfies this gamma 3. Then the equation 5 and 6 has at least one mass conserving solution G, which belongs to this space, right? Where C0 to TW L1 minus beta 1, which is the set of all space of all continuous function, weakly continuous function, right? Which are in belongs to vector L1 minus beta 1 space. Also, G belongs to this L infinity 0 to T L1 minus beta 1 R. For each t greater than 0, and satisfying this weak formulation. Actually, this type of problem, when we are dealing this type of a Kachi problem, we cannot find the classical solution for this type of a coagulation kernel. So we need to find out the weak solution. So this solution satisfies this weak formulation, right? First, we want to show that G is there exists a solution G, which belongs to this space and satisfy this weak formulation, which is also mass conserving, right? Now let us review some literature, known result. The first result in this direction was by Stewart in 1989. He actually proved the existence of weak solution to the coagulation binary fragmentation equation, where the coagulation kernel has almost a linear growth, and fragmentation kernel also almost linear growth, like 1 plus x plus y to the power alpha, where alpha is less than 1 and greater than equal to 0, right? This type of a kernel actually he covered. Later, he proved the uniqueness result when P and C is less than equal to 1 plus x plus y to the power half. And the first result on the existence of a Smoluchevsky coagulation kernel was proved for singular coagulation kernel. These kernel were actually the Stewart proved the result for the non-singular coagulation kernel. He did not cover the singular coagulation kernel, right? The first time Norris in 1999 he covered the singular coagulation kernel, but he actually considered the second moment of initial data is finite, which is very strong condition. But here we have like he considered like 0 to infinity x square initial data GIN initial point GIN x dx is finite, x square GIN x dx is finite, which is a more strong condition, right? Later in 2015, Canijo 1 again, proved the existence of weak solution to the coagulation and multiple fragmentation kernel, where the coagulation kernel is less than equal to 1 plus x plus y to the power alpha divided by xy to the power sigma. You can say alpha is less than 1, not equal to 1, exactly equal to 1. And the selection rate Sx is less than equal to S, x to the power zeta, where zeta also less than 1. But in my condition, we have covered alpha is equal to 1 and zeta is equal to 1. Here also, he did not prove the mass conservation properties of the solution. Means the solution is satisfy the mass conservation, the solution is mass conserving, right? This was the open problem. In this talk, actually, I want to cover all the things, right? Means I have also relaxed the second moment is finite, right? Which was proved by Morris. And also I have included alpha is equal to 1 and sigma is equal, zeta is equal to 1. Another thing, actually, they have when they actually in the first paper of Stewart and the second first paper of Stewart and the Camacho, they have considered the conservative appreciation of the problem, right? But I have considered both conservative and non-conservative truncation. What is conservative truncation and non-conservative truncation we'll discuss later. Now the truncated form of a coagulation process. Now how to solve this problem? The standard procedure to solve this problem, first we truncate the problem into truncated form. Then we want to show the existence and uniqueness of this of the truncated solution of this truncated problem, right? By using some compact support. Here we have truncated the initial data. The domain was 0 to infinity. We truncated to 0 to n, right? The initial data is represented by g and inx is equal to g inx, characteristics function of 0 to n x. And this is the coagulation kernel, which is truncated by using compact support 0 to n. But we want to actually avoid actually infinity because it has a singularity near the origin. So we have truncated the coagulation kernel 1 by n to n and 1 by n to n, right? To avoid the singularity, right? So this coagulation kernel has truncated like this, and the selection rate is truncated like this. Then putting equation of 14 and 15 and 16 into equation of 5 and 6, then we can get this equation 17 and 18. Now our aim is to solve equation number 17 and 18. Now how to solve this equation, right? So this is the truncated version of weak solution, because this identity will help us to solve to find the existence of weak solution, the existence of a truncated solution, right? So we have made this identity, right, where h omega y has a nice form. This form has been written here, equation number 21, and g omega and zeta xy has been expressed like this, equation number 20. Now this is the actually solution of this truncated equation 17 and 18. This proposition actually tells us the solution of equation number 17 and 18. Let zeta belongs to 0 to 1 and n greater than equal to 1. Then there exists a unique non-negative solution Gn, which belongs to C1 0 to infinity, L1 0 to n, to equation on 17, 18. In addition, it satisfies this equation, right? Now, how to prove this equation? Proposition number 2. Actually, I will give the sketch of the proof of proposition number 2, right? This proposition 2 can be proved by the help of the Picard-Lindelof theorem, what the Pickel-Lindelof theorem states that, let B is a Banach space. If G is a local ellipsis continuity function from B to B, and the initial data, if the initial data belongs to this Banach space B, then there exists a unique maximal solution zeta belongs to this C1 function 0 to T1 B to the initial value problem d zeta by dt g zeta, and zeta 0 is equal to zeta n. And either T1 is equal to infinity, or case 2 T is less than infinity, and limit T tends to infinity, norm of zeta T is equal to infinity. This is the Pickel-Lindelof theorem. Okay, for this problem, we can easily show that the right-hand side of equation number 17, right-hand side of equation number 17 means integral, first integral, second integral, third integral, and fourth are locally ellipses in L1 0n, right? In L1 0n, we can easily show that. Now, we want to then according to the Pickel-Lindelof theorem, then there exists a unique maximal solution zeta, means like a Gn belongs to this C1 function, C1 space, right? Now we want to prove either T1 is equal to infinity, or T1 is finite, or limit T tends to infinity, norm of T is equal to finite. Actually, we want to show that this T1 is equal to infinity. How to prove that? Take omega is equal to 1. Here, take omega is equal to 1. The corresponding zeta omega n and h omega n, omega 1 was the test function. We have taken omega 1 is equal to 1. The corresponding zeta omega 1 h omega will be like this. Actually, here was g omega n zeta and h omega. We put omega is equal to 1, identically equal to 1. That implies omega is equal to 1, and this omega x is equal to 1. 1 minus this will give you the total number of particles 0 to y, b of x xy dx will give the total number of particles, that is n, right? This is 1, this is 1, this is 1. After putting this equation of 20 and 21, we'll get zeta omega n, g omega n zeta is less than equal to 0, and h omega is equal to 1 by n. Then putting the value of zeta omega, g omega n zeta and h omega into equation number 19, then we'll get like this type of a bound. Then by the help of a Grunwald inequality, we can get this bound for Gn, norm of Gn is less than equal to this bound. Now apply the second case. Here T1 is finite, right? And limit T tends to T1, norm of zeta T is equal to infinity. Here T tends to T1, right? And T1 is finite. If you take the limit T tends to T1, right? Then we can get this term is also finite, right? So T1 is finite and T tends to T1, norm of this is not equal to infinity. Therefore, T1 is equal to infinity because it violates this case too. So T1 is equal to infinity. So this finishes the proof of a proposition of a 2. That means we have, for each n we get a solution. So we have a family of a solution, right? For each n we get one solution, then the solution belongs to this space, right? That means we get a family of solution. Now, let Gn be a sequential solution to the equation number 17 and 18 for each n. If this solution converges to some g, the question is this solution converges to some g? If it converges, in which sense it converges? We'll see. Does gnxt converges to gxt? If it converges, in what sense? Remember a result of fundamental importance in real analysis, that is Bolzano-Orestes theorem. Every bounded sequence in Rn has a convergent subsequence. Can we apply this Bolzano-Orestes theorem here? No, because this function Gn is bounded in L1, right? So we cannot apply, because this is Rn, which is, that one is L1. We cannot apply. Can something like be used? Is the sequence Gn is bounded? Yes, in L1 this sequence is bounded. Is a version of Bolzano-Orestes theorem true in L1? No, not for the convergence in the same norm of L1. Now, in what sense it convergence? Now we'll look, is it a convergence in also weakly? Actually, we know that in LP space, p greater than 1, every bounded sequence in LP convergence weakly has a weakly convergent subsequence, because LP is p greater than 1 is reflexive. If it is L infinity, then then it is also true. Every bounded sequence has convergence. Every bounded sequence has a convergence subsequence which converges weakly, right? But there is some problem in L1. What are these problems? We'll see in the next slide. What can prevent an L1 bounded sequence to be weakly convergent? One is a concentration, another is vanishing. Let us take an example. Gn, which is NP Gnx, and G belongs to which is infinitely differential function. Look for the one-dimensional, P is equal to 1, suppose, right? And G is greater than equal to 0, and support of a G is equal to support of a G is a subset of this ball, right? And norm of a G1 is equal to 1. You can if you derive this, if you solve this example, then you can see that Gn also belongs to this vectored L1 space, and also norm of a Gn is equal to 1, right? But you can see that there exist two sequences. One converges to weakly to 0, another converges to weakly to 1, right? We can see that the limit of this sequence in L1 space converges to two different limits. So, this sequence has no convergence subsequence which converges to weakly, right, near the origin. Another is vanishing. This sequence Gn is equal to exponential of minus mod of x minus n. If you apply the limit n tends to infinity, this will give you 0. In the similar process, we can see that this sequence, one is convergence to 0, another is convergence to 2, right? To avoid these two things, we need another theorem, which is due to the Dunford and Pettis, right? That theorem is the Dunford-Pettis theorem, which theorem states that if G is a family of G is a subset of L1, suppose G is a family of which is a subset of L1, then I is equivalent to second I. G is relatively weakly sequentially compact in L1 if and only if G is bounded and eta of G is equal to 0. The eta of G is defined as the infimum of or supremum of this integration is equal to 0. Actually, what is this integration? For a small measurable set A, the integration on that set A is very small. And for the second integral, so the second one actually the second one shows that for a finite set, right? For a finite measurable set, the integration outside of that finite measurable set is very small. Actually, this is the Dunford-Pettis theorem. There is another version of a Dunford-Pettis theorem, to prove the the second condition is also called uniform integrability. There is also another result to show the uniform uniform integrability of a sequence of function due to De La-Valle. That theorem is known as the De La-Valle quotient theorem, which theorem states that if G is a subset of L1, then 1 is equivalent to A is equivalent to B. G is uniformly integrable if eta of G is equal to 0, means this second integral, second term, second term. G is bounded, and there exists a sigma CVP infinity function so that supremum of each G belongs to G. Integration of omega sigma of G d omega is finite. Now, what is CVP infinity function? CVP infinity function means means they are actually non-negative and a non-negative convex function, which are infinite differential function. These functions are a CVP infinity function if they enjoy the following properties. At origin, these functions are 0. The value of this function at origin 0, and derivative also 0. And sigma j dash is also their derivative is a concave function. If you apply the limit p tends to infinity, sigma j dash p is equal to limit p tends to infinity sigma j p by p is infinity. For gamma belongs to 1 to 2, S gamma sigma j is equal to supremum of this is finite, right? If the function satisfies these properties, we call them the CVP infinity function. The CVP infinity function has some nice properties. These are the properties of the CVP infinity function. And the result based on the De La-Valle quotient theorem, actually to solve the problem, we need some condition on the initial data. This condition can be this result can be get from De La-Valle quotient by using the De La-Valle quotient theorem, right? Now, weak L1 compactness method. Here, first we want to show the sequence of function is uniform bound, right? After uniform bound, we want to show the sequence of function is uniform integrability, right? Since here there are two variables, one is x and another is t. For space variable, we want to apply the Dunford-Pettit theorem. For the time variable, we want to apply the Arzelà-Scaling theorem, right? This is the actually we want to implement here. Weak compactness result. First is uniform bound, means the norm of a G n is less than equal to some bt. Like t greater than 0, then there exists a constant gt depending on t, so that the norm of 0 to n x to the power minus 2 beta plus x gn xt dx is less than equal to gt for all t belongs to 0 to t. How to prove this one? Actually, I have divided this integral into two sub-integral. One is 0 to n x to the power minus beta gn xt dx plus 0 to n x gn xt dx. Actually, this is less than equal to the initial mass. So there is no difficulty to handle this integral. Only the problem is this one. Set test function omega is equal to x plus tau minus 2 beta, right? Into equation number 19 in the truncated version of weak solution. After setting this one, then applying Fatou's lemma and Lebesgue dominated converse theorem and Grunwald's inequality, we can show that this is less than equal to GT. So this is family of solution Gn is uniformly bounded. Then this actually equation, these equations are required to solve to prove the mass conservation of solutions, mass conserving properties of solution, and also some convergence result, right? This equation 13 represent actually 0 to n sigma 1. What is sigma 1? Sigma 1 is a CVP infinity function, right? sigma 1 x gnxt dx is less than equal to theta t. Means this is like a movement between 1 to 2, which is finite, right? And this is the condition of a uniform integrality. I have not given the details of the proof of this uniform integrality. It can be proved by the help of this CVP infinity function, and also CVP infinity function, and also the truncated version of weak solutions. Next, this is the time equicontinuity, right? This is the time equicontinuity, weakly equicontinuity, x to the power minus beta psi x cx gnxt dx, gnxt minus gnxx dx is less than equal to c5 rt t minus s, right? As t tends to s, then this will goes to 0. So this is the time equicontinuity. It can be easily proved. Now the proof of the theorem. From the Dale-Poisson theorem and the lemma 5 and 7, this 5 to 7, right? Then using the Dunphytty's theorem, means the family of solution is weakly compact in the space weighted L1 space, L1 x to the power minus beta, right? In this space. And for the time variable, we are applying here the Arzelà-Scully theorem. Then we can conclude from both the Dunphytty theorem and Arzelà-Scully theorem, we conclude that Gn is relatively compact in this space, right? For each t greater than 0. Means there is thus a subsequence Gn and non-negative function g belongs to this space such that Gn converges to this space. But we want to prove that Gn converges to G in x to the power beta, x to the power minus beta plus x to the power minus beta plus x dx, right? This can be proved. This can be improved. This weak convergence can be improved by applying lemma 5 and 13 and some superlinear growth, this 33. By applying, we can show that Gn converges to G. Next, to complete the proof, the truncated integral converges to the original integral. We want to show, actually I have omitted that one, that is the convergence of integrals. Last one. Here we want to show the mass conserving of solution, right? Look at this slide. If you apply limit n tends to infinity, right? If zeta 1 is equal to 1, this will give the conservative form, or mass zeta is equal to 1, this will give 0, then this equal to this, right? If zeta is equal to 0, then this equal to this one minus some term, right? For conservative case, means the initial mass is equal to final mass, right? For initial truncated mass is equal to the mass at any time, truncated mass at any time. That is the conservative truncation. Non-conservative truncation, we have another term, right? For the conservative case, one can easily prove by using 34 and 22. But what about the non-conservative case? Non-conservative case, zeta is equal to 0. Then from that equation, you can get this equal to an extra term. Look at this red color term, right? If you apply limit n tends to infinity, then we want to prove that this term will go to 0. How to prove? For x plus y greater than n, then either you know that x greater than n by 2 and or y greater than n by 2. Thus, sigma 1x plus sigma 1y. What is sigma 1x? Sigma 1x is a non-negative convex function. Sigma 1x plus sigma 1y is greater than sigma 1 n by 2. Here x plus y is less than equal to 2n. Look at this. Look at here. N minus x, y, the range of y is n minus x to n. So x plus y is less than equal to 2n. Then using lemma 6 and 29. What is lemma 6 and 29? Actually, lemma 6, this one I want to apply, right? This is less than equal to sigma 1x, gnxt dx is less than equal to theta t. X plus y is less than equal to 2n, right? I have multiplied here. I have multiplied x plus y is less than equal to 2n. I have taken 2n outside, 2 cancel, that is n. Then I multiplied here sigma 1 n by 2 divided sigma 1 n by 2. What is the bound of a sigma 1 n by 2? Sigma 1 n by 2 is less than sigma 1x plus sigma 1y. This is sigma 1x, sigma 1y. Since phi is a symmetry function, then this integral is nothing, that is 2 into this integral. 0 to t, 0 to n minus x to n, this, right? Actually, this integral is less than equal to theta t, right? Because look at here, this integral is less than equal to theta t. So this is theta t. Since sigma 1 has a superlinear growth, means sigma 1 x by x, as x tends to infinity, this tends to infinity, right? Sigma 1 x by x. If you take the reverse, x by sigma 1 of x, that will give you 0. This completes the proof of a theorem. This is all about the existence of mass conjugate solution to the coagulation, fragmentation, multiple fragmentation equation. These are the some reference. This is by me, evaluation equation and control theory, and this is another paper. Actually, this presentation based on these two papers, P.K. Barik, A.K. Giri, Philippe Lorenzo, mass conserving solution to the coagulation equation and singular kernel.
Thank you, Prashanta, for the nice talk.
Thank you, Avinash.
Yeah. So I'd like to ask the participants if they have any questions or comments to make.
Yes.
Hi, Prashant.
Hello, I'm Pankaj.
So in some slide, you give some necessary and sufficient condition for some sequence of function in L1 to have weak limit, right?
Okay.
In L1. So that's some theorem. My question is it required for only L1 function, right? For L2 or for P greater than equal to 2, this
only
is
L1.
don't need any equivalent condition because of Banach-Alaoglu's theorem. So we can
That is
correct?
Banach-Alaoglu theorem is only is for L infinite function, right?
Yes.
Yes. Only this Dunford-Fetish theorem is required only for the L1 space, because L1 space we have some problem near the origin and also vanishing at infinity. So we have problem only in L1 space, right?
No, if P greater than equal to 2, why is it happening?
P greater than 1, right? Then since the space LP is reflexive,
Yeah.
right? Every bounded sequence has a convergence subsequence which converges weakly. There is no problem, right?
Yes, so for P equal to 1, that condition.
Only P is equal to 1, there is a problem. If P greater than 1, there is nothing, right?
Yes.
Okay, so if there's no other question, then I request all the participants to thank the speaker for the nice talk again.
Thank you.